Acha, will you kindly switch off your phones, please? If somebody is outside, all of you can please take your seats. Is there anyone outside? If there is anyone outside, let them. Yeah. Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Namashri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Sachit Sukaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So it's a matter of great joy. First of all, I offer my Sashtang Pranams at the feet of Revered Swami Suhitanandaji Maharaj, Senior Vice President of our Ramakrishna Order. He is on a trip to Europe as well as the UK, and he has just arrived from France a day yesterday, and we had a short visit to Oxford, and day after tomorrow, after the retreat, we'll be leaving for Scotland. And then Maharaj goes to Ireland, then he again comes back to UK, spends 2 days with us. We have the blessed privilege of his holy company. Even if it is a short visit, we are all blessed by his holy presence. So, taking opportunity of his holy visit, we decided to organize a public meeting or a session today on the universal message of Swami Vivekananda. And we are very happy that Professor Ruth Harris, whom you all know, is the author of the famous book, The Guru to the World, The Legacy of Swami Vivekananda. That's a very popular book now. And before I begin, I'll just try to explain how Swami Vivekananda's or rather Swami Vivekananda's universal message, how it has impacted the entire world. So it is in that context she has tried to, which she'll speak about that message, the universal message which was filtered out through the numerous Western disciples, especially the women disciples in UK and America and other countries. So she'll be speaking, and then we will have Revered Maharaj, who's presiding over this session, and he will be speaking on the universal message of Swami Vivekananda. So I'll give a brief introduction of Ruth Harris. Everyone knows her, but still, she is an historian and also an academic associated right now with the Oxford University. And since 2011, she has been professor of modern history at the University of Oxford, All Souls College, which is part of Oxford University. And previously she was the fellow of St. John's College, Oxford from 83 to 87, and an associate professor at Smith College from 1987 to 1990, and a fellow of New College, Oxford. Between 1990 and 2016, she was awarded the Wolfson History Prize in 2010 for her book, The Man on Devil's Island. And of course, she is the author of the famous book, Guru to the World, The Legacy of Swami Vivekananda. Revered Maharaj, as all of you know, is a senior vice president of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission. And he had the privilege of serving Revered Swami Premeshanandaji Maharaj, a beloved disciple of Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi, for a long time. And it is through this association about which we will have the benefit of listening to him tomorrow as well in the spiritual retreat. Some very wonderful reminiscences and also the advice he used to give not only to monastics but also to the householder disciples. So he was the headmaster of the order's higher secondary schools in Rahara and Narendrapur. They are very prestigious schools of the Ramakrishna Mission. And then later principal and head of the residential school in Devghar, that is in Jharkhand at present. And in 1995, he became a trustee of the entire Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. And he joined the headquarters as an assistant general secretary in 1997 and became the general secretary from 2012 onwards. And he served in various capacities and he has traveled extensively and visited countries such as Singapore, Malaysia, Fiji, Australia, New Zealand, Bangladesh, and of course UK and France, spreading the ideals of Ramakrishna Vivekananda and also initiating devotees into spiritual life. So, as far as his publications are concerned, he has published a Bengali edition of Bhagavad Gita with Siddhara's commentary and Swami Premeshanandaji's comment. So he was very close to Revered Swami Premeshanandaji Maharaj, and some wonderful insights on the commentary of Siddhara's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita also, and then Sargachir Smriti, two Bengali books, and the latter being translated into English and other Indian languages, that is Musafire Ganthri and Sargachir Smriti, his reminiscences of his days in Sargachi, where Revered Swami Premeshanandaji Maharaj used to live. So I would now request our chief guest, Ruth Harris, to speak on Swami Vivekananda, and then we'll have Revered Maharaj's speech and blessings on the universal message of Swami Vivekananda. So I would request Ruth to begin the session.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. It's wonderful to be here today, and I'm very honored. I am extremely honored, and also to see so many people. It's interesting for me because in most contexts I have to explain who Swami Vivekananda was to my American colleagues. And it makes me very relaxed and happy and calm to know that you know why he's important. So I don't even have to begin with my usual comments about why he matters. So let me begin by saying that I started working on Swami Vivekananda many years ago now. And when I started giving papers, people were often struck by how different he appeared in different contexts. Indeed, there were those who kept on insisting that there were really two Vivekanandas, one for Indians and another that he displayed for Westerners. Now, behind those remarks, I was always a bit worried because I thought there was a suggestion that he approached these audiences differently because he somehow lacked authenticity, that he was somehow one way for one group and another way for another. I was wrong because I had read all the letters and the lectures. So today I want to explore how we can integrate the persona of the Indian Swami with the global guru. And I will argue that in teaching in different ways to different audiences, he sought to adapt to what he had learned from Ramakrishna about Adhikari Beda, is that the way to pronounce it? About the tradition that seeks to tailor spiritual instruction to the needs and capacities of individual aspirants. And that is what I believe he was trying to do with these different publics. When assimilating the many cosmopolitan influences he encountered while abroad, he was remarkably innovative and highly creative in his instruction, both with individuals and larger publics. And I will suggest, though, that the process of operating in these very different milieux produced inescapable tensions, especially for him, because he had to say different things, because each civilization, each person had different foibles, different faults, and each person and each civilization had good qualities and bad qualities. So it sounds like it's incoherent, but actually, if you understand the perspective from where he's speaking, it is absolutely Ramakrishna's teaching. So to explain better what I mean, I will turn to a quotation from Mary Funke, an American disciple who conveyed what she had learned about the Guru's role as a divine interlocutor. Remember, these women were accustomed to a very different vision of a Christian clergyman. Either he was a sentinel of the confessional, if he was a Catholic, or as a moral guide and ecclesiastical director, especially within Protestant contexts. Now, this is what Mary Funke said, quote, "The Guru is like a crystal. He reflects perfectly the consciousness of all who come to him. He thus understands how and in what way to help. He means by this that a guru must be able to see what each person needs, and he must meet them on their own plane of consciousness." This is an extraordinary recipe for adapting to the needs of the spiritual needs of individuals. She recognized that he understood Ramakrishna's view that in order to be effective, you had to speak in the same language as one's disciple. And I remember once reading the letters of Nivedita in Bagbazar, and she says during the plague that she actually feels sorry for the missionaries because they cannot learn to speak in the language of the people they're trying to comfort. And that is what she appreciates about Vivekananda. Vivekananda had learned that, quote, truth had a relative dimension, that it had to account not only for personal differences, but also for cultural variation. For me, perhaps as a female householder with children, the best example comes from the Kathamrita, which is suffused with cooking metaphors and the importance of mothers, particularly the Holy Mother, in attending to the stomachs for individual disciples. She was honored for the way she accounted for the physiological sensitivities of each one. This kind of mother's care, invested with special love, became a perfect metaphor for the different ways that people took in or ingested God. Everybody is different. In my view, it is also a simple way of opening up a discussion of the way universalism was based as much on difference as it was on unity. The recognition of difference was a recipe for a lack of coercion. Both Ramakrishna and Sharada Devi's example showed how universalism did not just accommodate difference, but often was difference. And of course, the Kathamrita records the many ways in which Ramakrishna explored different religions and then argued that they all followed a path to God. Again, there was the unity. In that way, they were like the special foods that Sharada Devi cooked for Ramakrishna's disciples. And in using the simple metaphor for the cooking, an everyday activity, they bring you up to the highest level. And of course, there's a bit of Ayurveda in there too. You know, it's for everybody. Each person has to have their own. When Vivekananda went west, he encountered a very different world, but was quick to see the spiritual possibilities. And I cannot emphasize enough my own amazement at a man who had never been west, who immediately begins to think, how can I begin to communicate with these people? His method was interactive, at times even improvisational, as he worked very much on the hoof, adjusting and tailoring his ideas to different audiences. And he was a master of the unexpected, constantly challenging his hearers to think outside of accustomed patterns of thought. I've been just reading a PS that he wrote to Mary Hale, where he talks about contradiction. He tells her, evil is not evil. It may be good. And he says, I'm going to be very Vivekananda, he says to her. He's, you know, because again, the wit comes through. This is an extraordinary perception of the way he encountered people who saw a difference between heaven and hell and tended to view things in very Manichaean terms. He wanted to show that, yes, fire is good when you use it to cook, but it's bad if it burns down your house. This requires different modes of thought. He was also, as you know, a spiritual democrat. Early on in his vocation, he argued for Sanskrit education for the poor and for women. And by traveling west, he also sought a global public for Hindu ideas, intending to spread the message of Vedanta far and wide. When he argued that India was the mother of spirituality, he claimed that India had a special capacity for religious invention, while simultaneously providing proof of India's ability to foster coexistence and refuge. But let's not kid ourselves. It was a very hard task. He came to the World Parliament in Chicago in 1893, and he had to work between all these stereotypes. And we all know that he didn't look like anybody else. He wore the saffron turban that he'd got from the Maharaja of Khetri. The orange robe and suit meant that he did not resemble either a wandering sadhu or a Western Christian minister in a somber black with white collar. He invented this famous costume, and I have to say the women in New England, they helped him, and it facilitated his address in this new world while retaining this spiritual demeanor so important to his description of Indian religion as both changing and ancient. That was very important to him. He wanted to show people that this was a very old tradition, but that he wasn't something that was antiquated. So he came up with something new. He said, quote, "We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions to be true." Unquote. In line with this view, and in deliberate contrast to Christian missionaries, Vivekananda sought no converts and distanced himself from formalized church building. Of course, he created the Vedanta societies, but as he put it, and this really came as a shock to them, his goal was only to make the Methodist a better Methodist, the Presbyterian a better Presbyterian, the Unitarian a better Unitarian. From the very beginning, he accepted diversity as integral to India and to Hinduism and contrasted it with what he called sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, which he associated with institutionalized Christianity, but not, of course, with Jesus. I mean, there was a big distinction between the two. Now, what I find amazing is that people cheered. Somehow he tapped into a vein of self-criticism, doubt, and vulnerability within his Western hearers. A young philosopher from the University of Chicago present recalled years later how there was a gasp running through the hall, that's the quotation, when Vivekananda contradicted the doctrine of original sin. And although many people were leaving Christianity's dogmatic sides in America, especially notions of original sin, it was still the religion that they had been brought up in. Instead, he said, quote, "It is a sin to call a man so. It is a standing libel on human nature." He wanted people not to concentrate on their sinful nature, but on the possibility of liberation. There's a big distinction there. His words fell on fertile soil as they chimed with America's growing rejection of a punitive God and reconsideration of the Genesis story in light of new scientific discoveries. And I might add, the morning after the Civil War, where people hated the idea that these millions of boys were consigned to hell. You know, they wanted to consider a life for their sons that was not based on judgment and sin alone. Now, if they thought this was novel and enticing, he was frustrated by the way they tried to attach him and his spiritualities to miracles and occult display. And so he was understandably irked when audiences assumed that as a yogi, he would be able to perform magical tricks, not dissimilar to the Indian snake charmers who drew crowds to American vaudeville theaters. Now, knowing now Bengalis and educated Indians, can you imagine the insult that people were associating him, a man like Vivekananda, with the men who were snake charmers? I think he had tremendous patience, actually, not to erupt. Even though he admitted to possessing yogic powers only on one or two occasions when he was in the West, he did not display them. And in Raja Yoga, as you all know, he concentrated instead on mental states and spiritual illumination rather than on getting powers. And people came to him wanting powers. Some of them wanted powers for their businesses. It's fascinating. Repeatedly, he refused to speak about the miraculous and criticized Christian scientists, many of whom were interested in Vedanta, for overly emphasizing healing and cures. He was also keen to reach Western audiences by probing the relationship between science and religion. And this is a side of Vivekananda that I think, in my view, is not enough talked about in India. I'm sure you know about it, but people don't understand. They think he just talks about religion, but he talks a lot about science. He wants to show that it's a way of showing that Hinduism is not about superstition. In fact, he was prone to throw the accusation back by accusing Christian fundamentalists of a literal belief in the Bible. So this explains why, if you look very carefully at his work, there's a lot about evolution, Pasteur, embryology. He used embryological metaphors a lot, chemistry and neurophysiology. He never rejected science, and it seems that he wrote about Akasha in a New York medical journal in an effort to see the parallels between Vedantic ideas and those still circulating in the physics community about what was called ether at this time. Am I okay with time? Is everybody with me? Are there any questions? Okay. So he saw science and religion as operating on different levels rather than in opposition to one another. And he said, "It seems to us that the conclusions of modern science are the very conclusions that Vedanta reached ages ago. But in modern science, they are written in the language of matter." It's very subtle, said very simply. Okay. But in discussing science, he criticized what we would now call scientism. He accepted evolution, but rejected the competition of natural selection, especially for the higher reaches of human morality. He rejected what we would call social Darwinism and the belief in the survival of the fittest. And I don't know if you know this, but if you read very carefully, he deplored the European genocide of Aboriginal people and scolded his Western audience for their cruelty. He said, "Wherever you have found weaker races, you have exterminated them by the roots." What is the history of your America, your Australia, and New Zealand, your Pacific Islands and South Africa? Where are those Aboriginal races today? They are all exterminated. You've killed them outright as if they were wild beasts. Now, this was an extraordinary remark. It's not that it wasn't said in the West. It was occasionally, but mostly it wasn't said as loudly as he said it. And I found it a very remarkable quotation. These examples suggest how he both engaged in their debates and showed respect for their concerns, but he was hardly slavish and openly scolded them for their murderous excesses. But he could be just as harsh as dealing with Indians, as you all know. He loved to scold them, and all of you will be familiar with this form of counter-preaching, if you have a guru as well. Many of you will know. And he loved the beauty of Hindu spirituality, but he similarly scolded his Indian audiences, especially for their timidity and fear. He hated people to be fearful, and for their lack of solidarity for one another, and for their quarrelsome, argumentative ways. So it's not like he did it only on one side and didn't do it on the other. He scolded everybody, but he also complimented everybody. So it's the two sides. What did it mean then to meet each person and each public on, quote, their level of consciousness? Now, this is where we turn to Ramakrishna. He learned how to do this, of course, from his guru. And the two metaphors were to be a child and a mother. Ramakrishna apparently said, quote, three words prick me: guru, doer, and father. Despite his reputation for man-making, Vivekananda sought to bring out the child nature in everyone through his own artfulness and humor, cultivating it in his American female disciples. And that's why he affectionately, in my view, called them babies. Both he and Ramakrishna were often maternal. We know about Vivekananda's love for cooking. We were just talking about it. Wrapping their disciples in an attention and love that allowed for both emotional transformation and spiritual elevation. The work on the early disciples amongst Ramakrishna is very moving because he lets them cry, he lets them do whatever they need to do to attain a higher level of illumination. And I think that people have forgotten this side of Vivekananda that he inherits from his guru. While the American women were amazed that he cooked for them, he too used cooking as a means of showing his maternal solicitude. Their relationship revealed Ramakrishna's savviness, this is my view, in picking someone who at least superficially was not like him. After all, who could be more distant from Ramakrishna than this jnani invested in cosmopolitan culture? But I would argue that deeper down, there were commonalities that soldered this bond between these two men. Ramakrishna was a bhakta, but famous for his untutored but brilliant observations on religious doctrine that used to stun the disciples. In contrast, Vivekananda seemed self-consciously intellectual, but admitted that he was easily wounded and was passionate about God devotion. Read the passages when he finds out that his sister committed suicide. He is brokenhearted, and sometimes he says he comes to give Vedanta, but then at other moments he once writes to Mrs. Ola Bull, I came here for the people I love. And he always says you cannot do anything without the Buddha's compassion. Again and again he says it. Although he called himself a severe Advaitist and preached the unity of the Atman and Brahman, he also willingly admitted a devotion to the Divine Mother when he said, quote, Kali worship is my special fad, though he knew that in America, if he spoke of this worship too openly, he would have encountered hostility, condescension, and disgust among his Western interlocutors. And that is why there's a reminiscence where they say, if I had told people about what Ramakrishna did, to reach stages of consciousness, I would have been thrown into the ditch. So for him, the Americans that he meets are dry. They cannot begin to understand. So he must teach them where they are at, because on that level, they're in elementary school, if you know what I mean. Okay. And he also said in Madras in early 1897, when he came back to India, it has become a trite saying that idolatry is wrong. I once thought so. And to pay the penalty of that, I had to learn my lessons sitting at the feet of a man who realized everything through idols. I allude to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He was also the only one who was instructed in Advaita Vedanta. So he recognizes that even some of the greatest people, the greatest divine figures, can find their way through pathways that are not obvious to a severe Advaitist. So what kind of guru was Ramakrishna with Vivekananda? Well, he allowed Vivekananda freedom to explore, argue, and play. And with his guru responding in turn with gentleness, humor, scolding, depending on the situation. The Guru brothers remembered how each disciple had enjoyed a unique relationship to Ramakrishna, some learning spiritual flexibility and others accepting greater discipline. Vivekananda admired his guru's capacity to transform people. He wrote, "We saw how often Sri Ramakrishna could encourage people who we thought were worthless and change the whole course of their lives. His method of teaching was phenomenal." And I think this was hard for Vivekananda because he couldn't always do it. He would say, "I am no Ramakrishna." Ramakrishna was, he always accepted that he was below Ramakrishna and Sharada Devi. He was within a lineage, but he never thought he was on the same level. Indeed, Ramakrishna had provided Vivekananda with an object lesson in spiritual democracy. We know that he wasn't a Brahmin, but a young man of Kayasa origin, a subcaste of indeterminate standing. And what's so interesting is when there's a Brahmin in the Kathamrita who makes fun of Ramakrishna for longing for Vivekananda, he says, "Why do you care so much about this lad? He's not even a Brahmin." And Ramakrishna goes, he's not interested in this kind of reasoning. So we can see how we approach individuals through the reminiscences of a devotee like Christine Greenstadel, better known as Sister Christine. I'm sure you all know her. She was of Lutheran stock. I'm very interested in the Western origins. Where do these people come from? From a little community near Nuremberg. So how does a person like this come to Vedanta? It's a fascinating question. If you read her remarks carefully, you will see that she was above all attracted to Vivekananda's critique of Western duty. He wrote, "This idea of duty is the midday summer sun, which scorches the innermost soul of mankind. Look at those poor slaves to duty. Duty leaves them no time to say prayers, no time to bathe. Duty is ever on them. They go out and work. Duty is on them. They come home and think of the work for the next day. Duty is on them. It is a living slave's life, at last dropping down in the street and dying in harness like a horse." Now again, I would argue that this echoed Ramakrishna, who was fearful of the endless life of repetitive toil that the British had imposed on this impoverished class of clerks. And he says, you're going to have wives who you won't be able to support, so you'll be in slavery to the household, and you'll be enslaved to the British, and you won't have time for your spirituality. Instead of duty, Vivekananda encouraged Christine to unfetter the soul and to become free. She was the eldest daughter in a large and poor family. At Thousand Island, Christine believed she first glimpsed how to escape duty. She wrote, "It is not difficult if one's devotion to the Guru were great enough, for then, like the snake, one dropped the old and put on the new." She explored, as did Sister Nivedita, the relationship between surrender and sovereignty that the guru-disciple relationship implied. And Vivekananda understood the difficulties of submitting to this lifelong relationship. He spoke to them of the dangers of personal love, that it would block spiritual transformation, and he worried that too much faith in personality tended to produce weakness and even idolatry. He said, "Adore your guru if there be real truth in him. The guru bhakti will quickly lead you to the highest," unquote. Of course, everything depended on finding a guru who possessed this, quote, real truth, how to judge whether they were the proper divine channel. And I think this is very interesting because this once again implied the importance of agency and of the relational in spiritual liberation, for it meant that the disciple was obliged to choose the means of his or her own discernment through the guru and then his own liberation. So it's not that the guru opens it up. You have to find the guru so that you can open it up. This is a very complex understanding. To do this, Vivekananda understood the need to create Vedantic context by judging what different cultures would absorb or reject. And that was very hard. So what he did was he attacked foibles, prejudices, valuations, in fact, everything that went to make up the personal self. He destroyed naivety and enthusiasm, forcing the discipline to understand that, quote, both good and evil are in Maya, and that freedom comes with liberation from both. And then he would say to them, and this was so hard for Westerners, and I find it hard, worship the terrible, even as now you worship the good. It's the ultimate paradox. And then get beyond both. Vivekananda tried to make them experience this contradiction during day-to-day lessons. Christine recounted how he, quote, hammered some disciples with the severest asceticism with regard to diet, habits, even clothing and conversation. With others who were intent on self-denial and in whom good had become a bondage, that's his phrase, he advocated greater expansiveness, greater enjoyment. Being good was not enough. It provided too firm a structure to unleash the true personality, to help liberation. Moreover, Vivekananda continually insisted that they stand on their own 2 feet, and this was very hard for them. Here was the paradox. How could they know their own views if he was always criticizing and directing? And yet again, Christine realized that he had a mode of questioning, a yes, with a question mark, that urged the devotee to go off and think again. Only at the 3rd time may he, quote, point out the error and suggest that, quote, our Western mode of thought had narrowed their vision. He let his devotees choose, saying simply, quote, it's not for you. And I can't tell you, after Christian clergymen, this was joy. So the only thing that happened was the exploration of mutual of spiritual possibilities that was individualized. So we also realized that he was different for everybody else. For some, he was called a spiritual father. To others, he was a mother in patience and gentleness. And still to others, he was the guardian of the threshold. For all the criticism and sternness, Christine believed that he tried to make people, quote, feel great. Although he sought to correct faults and weaknesses, she wrote, he sought the divine self in others. So, how very different this process must have felt from the ordinary engagement with, as I said, Christian clergymen who were still spent a lot of time on the notions of sin, redemption, and atonement is very interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the last part, and that's on the larger audiences. I think one of the reasons why he tried to then move this model of instruction to the larger audiences, this is my argument. For this reason, he felt he had to preach against materialism, violence, and fanaticism in the Euro-American world, and to increase their mental, spiritual, and physical flexibility. So against the busyness of Western industry and punctuality, he asserted the primacy of meditation and timelessness and explained that processes of concentration were not ends but means. So that was the meditation. I mean, if you look very carefully again at when he encounters American society, he makes fun of the women in their straightened corsets. He makes fun of he thinks they're very virtuous, but they have no bhakti. He feels he needs to loosen them up. And one of the ways that he tries to do that is in yoga. It's about finding a firm seat, but to let the body and the mind work together. He told them not to think about faith, but to focus on realization, not on ideas of Christian duty. He did not seek the miraculous, as Christian scientists did, but instead advised perseverance in the search for transcendence. The discipline came out of that transcendence, but it wasn't discipline for its own sake. It wasn't to deprive the self, it was to enhance the self. If these techniques worked in the West, India required a different approach. There, he wanted to shift attitudes of subservience and fear that he associated with colonialism and to resist needless imitation. Now, all of you who know Vivekananda know that when he was young, he loved the imitation of Christ. And he took the Gita and this book, the Thomas à Kempis's Imitation of Christ. The second is a 15th century text that guided Christian aspirants to withdraw from the world in search of spiritual growth. He valued it as a manual of devotion, equal to any within his own tradition. He extolled it precisely because it indicted British missionaries who he maintained did not follow its teachings. But later, he became more ambivalent about the word and the notion of imitation, because it smacked of forms of mental and physical subordination. As a guru and as a human being, he labored to understand how one changed while remaining oneself. And for me, this is the lesson for me personally, this is my lesson from Vivekananda. He labored to understand how, this was an existential concern to which he always returned. Such issues were personal, but they were also profoundly cultural and political. How did a people or a nation alter itself or find new sources of strength without surrendering its values and identity? This is the cosmopolitan Vivekananda. How do I remain a Hindu, a Vedantin, and open myself to the world? That is the essence of what he was trying to do and what is so difficult to do. These questions resonated keenly in India as people reckoned with the moral, psychological, and material impacts of colonialism and its humiliations. So he talked about, people who tried to ape Western fashions. That's bad imitation. As early as 1894, he wondered if the Indian masses, that was his word, could become Occidental in energy, activism, and equality while remaining Hindu in religion. By religion, he meant not only spiritual concerns, but also cultural values. He meant dharma. How could India remain open to the world without losing itself in harmful Western ideas? How were Indians, both as individuals and as a nation, to realize themselves? And this is the kind of question we all ask ourselves now with social media. How do we use the benefits of it, but also not get drowned by its madness, its dystopian qualities? I have suggested he taught meditation to urge Westerners away from busyness, distraction, and hardness. He thought there was a hardness, a steeliness that came with the materialism. That's why he made fun of the women wearing corsets. He thought they were hard. When he returned to India, he constrained the spiritual spontaneity of his guru brothers and novices with new routines, regulations, and disciplines. The one I love best is you cannot spend the whole day chatting. And when I went to Bengal for the first time, people spent a lot of time chatting. The monks transformed themselves as they became advocates of seva and distributed food during the famine after 1897, engaging famously in more welfare and educational activisms. And the reports of the shock of seeing these monks, sannyasins, in the field, sacrificing themselves, this is for India. This was Indian. It was really a change in how the vocation was seen. He showed his dedication to this, quote, practical approach, even in small initiatives. For example, back in India, he instituted the Delsart method in Belur Mat, a system of breath control and expression pioneered by the French singing and acting coach, Francois Delsart. He had mocked this method in America, but he thought that the Indians needed to learn how to present themselves. In the West, he had mocked this, as I said, he wanted in the West people to learn to control the pranayama, right? Obviously. But in India, he even joined these exercises to dumbbell training to enhance resilience so that his followers might be physically strong when they worked among the poor. So he goes back and forth. Now, these little examples show Vivekananda's willingness to engage with people of different creeds around the world, but also to value their contributions, even if they were foreign. Mostly he wanted to bring people from both East and West to the middle. And in this way, he reminds me very much of the Buddha. It's the middle way. But his emphasis on embracing new ideas and spiritual techniques did not mean that he advocated imitation, and certainly not homogenization. People were not to become the same. He attempted almost always to balance tendencies, both within individuals and in larger societies. And though he scolded everywhere, he also encouraged everywhere, and above all listened, seeking to understand. And I think this is the key, that listening. He had a capacity to listen. So far, I've concentrated on Vivekananda's attempts to pull his audiences away from extremes, but there was a radical edge sometimes to Vivekananda and how he viewed being a sannyasin. You will no doubt remember the story of how, when he went on pilgrimage to Kir Bhawani in Kashmir in 1898, he plunged into mystical foreboding, wanting nothing more than to sit on the lap of Kali. And Sister Nivedita could not understand how he could abandon all his grand designs to cultivate a baby-like non-self, like Ramakrishna. But for him, this state of childlike detachment was the only way a sannyasin might rightfully intervene in the world. He was going back to his origins, back to Kali, back to babyhood, before he reclaimed the otherworldliness before re-engaging. He wanted this detachment because that's the only proper way for a sannyasin to intervene. This is my argument. His version of Hindu universalism was expansive, ecumenical, at times aggressive, not violent. He wanted people to stick up for themselves, and his message international and innovative, at times insistent, even defensive. When people would talk about sati in India, he got very defensive, and it hurt him, because he was opposed to it, depending on individuals, groups, and contexts. This description, for me, suggests why the polarity of East and West could not ultimately contain the shifting moods, emotions, and ideas that he tried to express to so many different audiences. We may only grasp his significance if we accept that Vivekananda operated in many different registers. It's not that there's two Vivekanandas, it's just that the world contains many different cultures. Trying to grapple with the difficulties of communication in different cultures and with the asymmetrical relations of power that imperialism imposed. He did not want to be treated as the honorary black man. He was determined not to be treated in that way. And yet, he needs help, money, advice. So it was a constant game of readjustment. But none of this meant that there was more than one Vivekananda. The Indian Swami and the global guru trying to create a universalism that encompassed these many differences. Thank you very much.
What shall I say?
Good. Thank you, everyone. That's really kind.
So now I would humbly request Revered Swami Suhitanandaji Maharaj to speak on the universal message to bless us by speaking and concluding today's session.
revered monks and the devotees or the admirers. We all have been transported into some other world. So long, she kept us in an holy atmosphere. We were floating along with her in the proximity of Swamiji. Swamiji, sincerely he himself said, "No nation have any claim on me. I belong as to Europe, so to India." So certainly, Swamiji was of this type. And Christopher Issaru had mentioned that his nationalism, because India also claims that he brought the new India, he is the hero for the new India. But his nationalism was, in the language of Christopher Issaru, it is internationalism sublimated. It is not nationalism. It is some sort of internationalism sublimated. That he never made his statements or actions, anything parochial, confined within India. His every speech, every talk, every action, it would have its global implication. This is Swami Vivekananda. During the Corona period, we were confined as you also, same thing, in the house. There we 3 persons had to remain in the same building. Only our food is come from outside, from our main kitchen, but we had to remain. So there, that time, how to pass the time? So much time we shall have to pass without any other engagement. So I suggested, let us read some books. So one book was with me, one D. Suja. D. Suja is a Don Bosco father. He wrote a book 10 years back. He presented me that book. Its name was Man Without Frontiers. Man Without Frontiers, it was lying with me because I could not find time to read. As we know, that we are always sometimes to talk, so for that we make some necessary preparations, skipping over, turning over the pages of some books and manage. So we thought that book is lying, let us go through it, page to page, cover to cover. We started reading. It's a fantastic book. That man has been, in the introduction, has mentioned that, I am Christian. I was a student and my philosophy PhD paper was this book. I was asked to write down something to show that Vivekananda, whatever he did, it was nothing so original. It was more or less some interpretation of the Christianity. That was the idea. And with that intention, I started writing that book. And to write and give it some authentic shape, naturally I had to go through some original books. As I was going through the books and I subdivided some chapters and I was stumbled into something wonderful. Everywhere, every aspect, in language, in philosophy, in literature, in any aspect, I could find that man is without frontiers. Even in his spirituality also, that man, how he could just comprehend all other spiritual persons together. He never contradicted anyone. Swamiji's message was that man is moving not from error to truth, but from the lower truth to the higher truth. This is a so positive thing. Wherever you are, you think that you are well. And from there, you are going up. No question of deformation, no question of going down, nothing. Even if you commit anything error, you know it, that you have knowingly done it for your own experience. You have gained the experience, henceforth you will go to a better, higher level. So this positive approach, Swamiji, it is a sincerely something unparalleled. And that book, it was probably 600 pages book. We meticulously gone through it, between the lines, between the words, and sincerely we felt ourselves very much busy, engrossed, and uplifted. Another, I read, myself have read, another Christian saint. She has mentioned about Holy Mother, Saint Benedicta. Saint Benedicta, she has composed an article about Holy Mother. She has given Holy Mother who has given, she has given it the title Sahana Yoga. Sahana Yoga means forbearance. Forbearance also can be a method of sadhana. Forbearance. And that we can find in the life of Holy Mother. So, thus you can see the impact of Sri Ramakrishna, impact of Holy Mother, impact of Vivekananda. Now it is in the world. It is now in the world. Nivedita, at that time, she wrote to MacLeod. We, those persons who are moving with Swami Vivekananda, we know what he is, who he is. But soon when we will leave the world, the person will go into obscurity. But again, after 150 years, he will give his own appearance and in a thundering way. That is the thing happened. Now if you count the days, you will find that it is mostly nearly 150 years. So this time, and that's, we find the result of that thundering, here is. See? See, where she was. Where she was, she has no business, nothing of this Ramakrishna mission, and no connection. She came for her own career, but she landed into this. Who has made her? Now she is talking as if she is a devotee. Though we can't say, but she is talking in that language. She is advocating Swamiji as if she has been the pleader on behalf of Swamiji. She feels that I am to defend Swamiji. Why? Because she has been convinced. She has been convinced. The inner conscience has been convinced. That is the purpose of Swamiji. Swamiji came to rouse the inner conscience of every person. And that has been becoming successful, we should say. I would like to relate how Swami Vivekananda has become worldwide acceptance. I would relate some incidents. All I myself was the witness then there. Once I was invited at Fiji. At that time I was the Secretary General. I was invited Fiji to inaugurate some meditation hall, Universal Meditation Hall. I went there, I could find 5 pictures were there and all covered, and next day those things will be unveiled. So as usual, we on the appointed time we went with 2-3 monks were there, and I could find one bus is coming, one father came, another bus also came, one mullah came, Muslim priest also came, and we all were taken together into the shrine. Now, as usual, I first unveiled the statue of Sri Ramakrishna, another monk unveiled the statue of Holy Mother, a photo of Holy Mother, the third one unveiled the picture of Swamiji. The fourth, it was Jesus Christ. The father unveiled it, and unveiled it with all the rituals, formalities, as they do in a church. And the Muslim person also, he also unveiled it, what was there. Generally Muhammad's picture is not forbidden. So what is to be written there? They are written Al-Haq. Al-Haq means the truth. This is one of the Allah's name. In the Quran, 99 names have been suggested, and one name is Al-Haq. That name was there. Certainly he took the permission from the Muslim community, convinced them, and just he unveiled this Al-Haq. And they also, afterwards, I read from the Gita, they read from the Bible, and they read from the Quran, and with all their devotees and admirers, we had a common just feast, something like that. So this is this, and along with it, I would add another more interesting thing, implication of this universal temple. Next day, evening time, as usual, in our evening Vesper prayer time, I went a little earlier. And I could find one mother with 2-3 children waiting there. I asked the mother, do you come regularly? Because there's hardly any people come. Do you come regularly? No. I'm a Christian. I stay here. Now, yesterday, my father has opened it. Christ has been installed here. So it is as good as a church to me. So this is the thing. This is a universal aspect of Swami Vivekananda. Another incident, let me share. In Argentina, I was in a Catholic family. Next day was Sunday, so the Catholic family, they would attend the church. They said, Swamiji, tomorrow your breakfast will be arranged by so and so, we shall be going to the church. Then I suggested, is there any harm if I go? Well, will you go? Yes, I am ready to go. Then they were more excited, so they probably gave some prior information to the father. And naturally, with this dress I went. Naturally, I was given some special seat. I sat, whole process was done. Afterwards, we were coming back out and going back. At that time, certainly they gave some presentations and everything. While going out, I simply one question to that family. You are Catholic. How are you synchronizing this your religion and Swami Vivekananda, this Vedanta movement? How are you synchronizing? I put this question to the family. Immediately that man said, see, from birth to death I am a Christian. But in my spiritual life, I am a follower of Sri Ramakrishna. This is the thing. This is this universalism. This is universalism. I can... Time?
Please continue. Yes, more than 20 minutes.
I can mention another interesting incident, Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo in Brazil, Belo Horizonte. Some of you might have read this incident. I went to Brazil, so this Swami said, Swami, do you like to see another Ramakrishna mission? I said, what? I am here in Ramakrishna Mission. Well, no, another Ramakrishna Mission is there. I became curious, well, how is it possible? Look, I shall not disclose now. I shall take you there. And then he took me. I could find sincerely in remote village, emblem, Ramakrishna Mission emblem is there, and Ramakrishna Mission is also written there. Look, what it is. Let us go. He informed them. So we went there. It is some orphanage. Orphanage is being run. How it was run? One Catholic gentleman, while he was driving, religious-minded man, driving, he could find some image on the windshield. He could not understand what sort of a mystic figure. Occasionally, again and again it is coming. Then he got, probably in the dream or something, that you do something for the poor. Then he consulted the father. The father suggested, what is the harm? Probably some saintly person is talking with you, communicating. What is the harm? It's a good thing. Well, you start doing something for the poor. He started something for the poor. Then that snowballed. Then he got some offer of this some orphanage-like place. And he had the capacity, he purchased it and started running that orphanage. And it was going on. Now, this orphanage kiddies, they were crying. So he was, what to do, how can he solve it? Just accidentally, one book came in his hand. That it was the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. He turned over the pages, and there he could find the figure of Brahmananda, Swami Brahmananda. And he was startled. This gentleman is coming and appearing before me and insisting me to do something for the poor. And I have done it. And that, again, in that orphanage, he wanted to dig a well. It was a rock. So he thought of leaving it and tried somewhere. Again, Brahmananda came in his vision, said, no, you are right place, you strike again, you will find it. And that well is still being preserved, and that water they are using for the shrine is still, that rock is there. And more than that, as I have mentioned, these children used to cry. So in the meantime, through gospel, he has come across Sri Ramakrishna and got the picture, seen the picture of Holy Mother, and brought also. So he placed one picture of Holy Mother in that children's corner and said, whenever you will feel lonely, you tell her. And the story goes, because all the persons have died, but that orphanage is still continuing, and the things are there. Once they suggested to us whether to take over, but we said no, when it is going on, let it go, and especially government also has taken over. So now it is going on. But see how this, though it appears mystic, but still how the impact is going on. Another incident, more or less like this. This is one Iraq lady. She came to Fiji, and because the ladies are always try to be in the kitchen, so she also was in the kitchen as well in the shrine, appear also helping. She said, Maharaj, I had a very serious problem, and that problem has solved by going through Holy Mother's life. She has a daughter. That daughter, very, very problematic. All sorts of nuisance she is committing. Even being mother, once I thought, it would have been better if my daughter would have died. So much. Then I accidentally got a book, and that book about Holy Mother, I went through the life of Holy Mother, and there I could find the mother also had same problem. The Radhi, probably, Radharani. Mother has to look after Radharani. So henceforth, I have started addressing my daughter not in her old name, but in the name of Radharani, and my problem has been solved. See how this Vedanta, the Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna, how they have their universal implications and applications. I would like to finish. I would like to finish with another interesting incident. This also, Sapalo. Sapalo, the vice president, previously he was the president, and they started a few centers, a few devotees. Ritajananda Maharaj, he was in Argentina. He took initiation from Ritajananda Maharaj while he was a student. He was, from his childhood, he was in touch with Ritajananda Maharaj. Naturally, Ritajananda Maharaj used to take care about his moral life, academic life, health, everything. Very strict master. And inspired him to study nicely. And gradually he became a doctor and renowned physician. And at present, he is the topmost cardiac surgeon of this Sapalo. That gentleman, at present at that time he was the president, he came and talked with me. Some formal business talk was over, then informal talk was going on. I just inquired about how many issues you are having, something like that, sons and daughters, and what you are doing. Anyhow, he said, I have 3 sons. My senior first son, he is also a doctor. He is in here. My second son, he has become a chartered accountant. He has settled in America. Then he went silent, and then I said, what about your third son? My third son, that has been my problem. What is that? This ashram is my third son. This ashram is my third son. So this is this, how now you can well understand that this Swami is come. It is having its implication, how is that it has entered into our society. Thank you.
So I'm reminding all of you that tomorrow there is a retreat. We'll have Revered Maharaj speaking on the spiritual, the different aspects of spiritual life, practical spiritual life, as opposed to the theological aspects. The experiences, Revered Maharaj kindly agreed, because he was in touch with some living masters. That is very important. The satsang or holy company, which Sri Ramakrishna used to emphasize so much. So living with the real spiritual masters, you have a totally different perspective. Academically, you may have a lot of wonderful ideas, but unless they are practiced in real life. So we have Maharaj with us, and tomorrow we have different sessions. We'll see how much Maharaj has tremendous energy. He can. I was surprised that he walks for nearly 3 hours every day or more. So we will request Maharaj to guide us, bless us, all the devotees especially who are here and who would be keen to ask. You can freely ask questions as well. That even today we have a few minutes. If there is some question, you can ask. Otherwise, you can reserve it for tomorrow. And we will have extended sessions whenever Maharaj is free. We don't want to confine ourselves to a formatted program, you see, that spirituality is always spontaneous. So when Maharaj comes, whatever he wants, whatever, say today he gave such a wonderful inspirational speech, giving live examples. They were not from the book. It's just things which he observed, things which he has intuitively understood about spirituality. That's a huge difference between understanding spiritual truths intellectually and also coming in touch with some live living experiences, and with his vast experience with students, with devotees, disciples, and also extensive travel, he has seen the divine Leela of Sri Ramakrishna unfolding. So tomorrow we will all be, most of you I think have registered for the Shibir, but if you are not, you can just come at 10 o'clock, and but please be present on time. So we want to start everything so that the spiritual retreat goes on smoothly. So I would thank Ruth Harris for her wonderful exposition of Swami Vivekananda, which she has expressed in great detail in her book, Guru to the World, The Legacy of Swami Vivekananda. Everyone should read this book. And we came to know about a new book, Man Without Frontiers. Now, I think we have a copy here. Maharaj has inspired us. Let us also read about that.
Certainly.
Yeah, it should. It's because these unknown books, you know, Sri Ramakrishna inspires people through various ways. Unknown people, we think we are being associated with the Ramakrishna movement, and we know, but there are people who, like Ruth, she could write a book like this, Guru to the World, which I don't think Indians would have dared to write.
Yes, no.
Guru to the World. You just imagine, she has used the word Guru.
Title we cannot give.
How can you imagine somebody from a totally alien culture, and she had, as she says, she had no background of Vedanta or Ramakrishna or Vivekananda. So Sri Ramakrishna's divine will and divine power can make things happen. So we'll be hearing from Maharaj, because he has met many such people who have been divinely inspired and transformed their own lives, and in the process changed many lives, especially Swami Premeshanandji. They used to say he used to catch young boys. So many monks, you can just lose count of the number of boys he inspired to become monks. That's not a joke. And many of them came under his wonderful influence to inspire renunciation, real practical spirituality in people, especially younger generation. That's a great thing. So we will hear a lot tomorrow, and now we shall go for Aarti, and after Aarti, we still have a few minutes, Maharaj. If anybody wants to ask, you can ask. After Aarti, there will be pranams in the visitors' room. Now, yeah, there are 12 minutes. We can, one or two questions if you have. And after Aarti, I would request all of you not to just rush in, but in a queue, where Maharaj will be sitting in the visitors' room. And one after another, everyone can take his, receive his blessings. They can do pranams, and then we'll conclude for the day, and hoping that all of you will be present on time tomorrow. So a few questions, if somebody has any question related. Yes.
Can I ask one question? Not Swami Suhitanandaji, but Ruth Harris. How she became interested on Swami Vivekananda and started writing on Vivekananda? Could you kindly tell us
My story.
Yes.
Okay. By training, I'm a European historian, and I worked mostly on French subjects. So I was interested in Romain Rolland, who met Gandhi. So that was what I worked on. But then I saw that he wrote on Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. And that got me very interested, because he was also very expansive about American spirituality, and especially William James, who of course was an interlocutor of Vivekananda. And I was very struck by this, because normally French intellectuals don't take Americans very seriously. And he recognized that William James was extraordinary. And it was from there that I started to, I heard some very interesting lectures on the Gita. And I read it, and I listened to a good version. And I began to think about how this universal text was not part of the Western heritage. And then I read Vivekananda's letters, and I saw this was the problem, how to expand the universal inheritance. But when I wrote the book, I was also intent on speaking about what Vivekananda did say and not what people attribute to him. And there's so much in the last 20 years that people have said Vivekananda believed in. And it goes back to what you said about nationalism. And I thought that there had been ways in which his legacy had been tainted and misunderstood and seen also as promoting violence against people who were not Hindus. And I thought, wow, I've read this. How can this be? And even when I published the book, when I sent the book off, there was somebody who was furious at me, wrote and said, how dare you? You have to write about Vivekananda today. But that was the whole point. I was trying to say Vivekananda in his own time. And also to try and understand this complex man who was rare. And in my view, there was a famous Chinese historian at Oxford who's actually related to Swami Sarvapriyananda. And he said to me, I have a relative who says the three most important people in the modern era were Marx, Freud, and Vivekananda. And this really interested me because I remember reading Marx and Freud and Darwin, but I never read Vivekananda. So I thought, okay, who is this? He was a Chinese historian, but of Indian Bengali origin. And it made me think, because of course the Vivekananda story is about creating these cosmopolitan links in a world of imperialism without losing one's roots. And this is the hardest thing to do. I mean, we all know this. I come from an immigrant family in America. This was always the question. That's why I'm interested in what he said about imitation. Imitation is good, but only to a certain point. Also, how do you accept new ideas, but remain true to yourself? This happens on all kinds of levels for all of us, but it's central to our political and cultural consciousness. So that's how I came to the book. It's quite a complicated way. I've been working for years on science and religion. I've written a book on the Dreyfus Affair, a book on the miracles and apparitions at Lourdes, but I wanted to internationalize the debate. And of course, I knew that Vivekananda was the one. Yeah. There's someone there. Yeah.
Yes. One question. Yeah,
Yeah.
one question, last question. We have 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Please.
I think my mind is always full of doubt and fear. Whenever I feel like starting something, I'm always afraid of things. And I think now it means that I leave everything up to the God. I know it, I understand it. I cannot achieve that level of leaving everything up to God and just be fearless. Like you said, Swamiji hated fear. How can I overcome my challenge? I'm not.
That's
You're asking to Maharaj?
that's Maharaj. Yeah.
How to be fearless, and so many doubts
Say.
come, and you
Yes.
said, na? Fearless.
We are inherently, actually, we like to become full. We like to become full. We don't want to want anything. That stage is very, very difficult, but we always want something. And we're always afraid that what I want, I may miss it. There the problem comes here. What I desire, I do not get, and what I get, I do not desire. This is the problem. You have no hand on it. You have no hand on it. Why, whatever I desire, I shall not get. Even when I shall get, at that time I do not desire it. This is a hard fact of nature. You are to accept it. Otherwise you will suffer. You will suffer. You accept it, then you will feel that I have no suffering. You will accept that anything may happen. Anything may happen any moment. You are moving. You don't know whether your next step you will meet with an accident. You don't know. From what source some fortune may come. You don't know. At that time we say, oh, God's grace, God's grace. We generally, the Vedantic, we call it karma fall, laws of causation. That means, past I did something, that result is coming. What we see, we never see the present. We always see the past. The present is the result of the past. That I am seeing. And what I am seeing, that will become the future. The present nobody sees. Always we see the past and it floats into the future. This is the two things are there. We sometimes say ever present, now, always now, all these terms are there, but actually it is not possible. To go to that stage is to go to the infinite stage of infinity. Whenever I say it is now at 6 p.m. Is it 6 p.m.? How do you know 6 p.m.? Who said that it is 6 p.m.? In contrast to the infinite time, it is 6 p.m. In contrast to the infinite time, it is 6 p.m. This hall is, what is this hall? In contrast to the infinite space, it is this hall. So we shall have to take in this broad perspective everything. Then you will only get satisfaction of your mind and peace of mind. You know that anything time may happen. Anything. This infinite is something which is unknown and unknowable, but I am some finite point in it. And that also is in a flux. You are never same person. What you are born and what you are today and what you will be tomorrow, nothing present, everything in a flux. So accept this continuous flow of the creation, your physical, mental, psychological, and gross worlds. Everything is moving. Accept it, you will feel happy. Otherwise, you could go on lamenting.
It's hard to accept.